negotiating D365 subscriptions and price increases, and the question of whether or not D365 is a top system for 2025. Those are just two of the topics we're going to cover in episode 5 of Journey to D365.
Welcome to Journey to D365, the podcast that covers everything related to Microsoft Dynamics 365 implementations. This podcast is not affiliated with Microsoft and covers the realistic truth behind D365 finance and operations and Business Central ERP implementation success. Whether you're new to the world of Microsoft or not, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 5 of the Journey to Dynamics 365 podcast. This is the podcast that covers everything related to D365 implementations. It's a tech agnostic and independent objective view of D365 implementations, and this podcast is not affiliated with Microsoft Dynamics or Microsoft as a company. Joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Fiakuski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm your host here today. I'm also the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their D365 implementations as well as their non-Microsoft implementations as well. And we've got a great show for you today. If you'd like to see any of the past episodes of this show that you might have missed, you can just go to the website called journey2d365.com. And you can see all the past episodes there and keep up with upcoming ones as well. And you can also subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you prefer by going to journey2d365.com. Got a great show for you today. We're going to cover a few different topics. We're going to start off by talking about whether or not Dynamics 365 is one of the top systems for 2025 and whether or not it's a good idea to be investing in that product here in the coming year and years. And then later in the show, and by the way, I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It could be, there's a high likelihood it could be a good thing to invest in. So those of you that have already committed to D365, don't panic. We're not going to come in and tell you it's not a good idea, but we are going to tell you how D365 fares, or at least talk at a high level about how D365 fares in the marketplace heading into 2025. And then later in the show, we are going to have Adam Mansfield from a company called UpperEdge. He's going to be on the show talking about how to negotiate D365 Cloud subscriptions, as well as how to navigate some of the price increases that are coming down the pike. So it's going to be something you want to stick around for, especially if you're going through the procurement process right now with Microsoft and your D365 implementation. But before we get to all of that, we also want to cover a question we got on social media before we get into our other meaty topics here today. What have you got for us, Darian?
Yeah, so one of our first social questions today is, one key factor for project success is who drives the project. If SI drives a project, it is bound to have many unpleasant surprises. If process is standardized, but one BU extension to another BU is not simple, if another BU operates in another region or under different vendors/stakeholders. So basically, I think the question is just asking, what is the key factor for project success then for driving the project?
Well, that's a great question. And for those that don't know, the acronym BU stands for business unit. So this question is referring to or alluding to the fact that a lot of times organizations that are implementing Dynamics 365 are implementing the software across multiple business units. So the question becomes, how much do you want to standardize your processes? How much do you want to create sort of a common platform of how you implement D365? And so that's really the key thing we've got to work through. And I think this is an important question or topic for any sort of ERP implementation, but it's especially important for D365 implementations. And the reason for that is because D365, generally speaking, is more flexible than a lot of other ERP systems that are out there. There's a lot you can do with Power Platform, which we talked about just a couple weeks ago or a couple episodes ago. I think it was episode number 3. Where we talked about, we had our interview guest talk about Power Platform, Power BI, Power Apps, and how that all sort of ties into D365 and enables a certain amount of flexibility that a lot of the other ERP systems don't have. So while it's generally probably a net positive that D365 in the Microsoft ecosystem provides so much flexibility, there is a dark side to that, which is it can be really difficult to sort of force or impose changes or impose standardization throughout the organization. Even if you want to standardize, it can be difficult because you have a really good excuse not to when you have a tool like D365 that is so flexible. So that's the thing you've got to navigate, is just recognize that the strength of the product can actually be a weakness, or there is a dark side that you've got to manage and mitigate that risk. And, a lot of times organizations realize early in a D365 implementation that, hey, wait a minute, I could just change the software to fit my old way of doing things. And then you sort of get this pushback and resistance to change that's enabled by the fact that you have such a flexible tool. So I don't know that I'm giving a simple answer to how to navigate that, but that's where project governance is so important. That's where balancing out this agile approach that most D365 implementations follow with the sure step methodology. That's where balancing that agile-esque type of approach with more of an upfront waterfall-ish sort of definition of business processes and clarity on what it is you're trying to accomplish with the implementation is so important. And that sometimes that just takes time. And usually it does just take a lot of time in an implementation to get that alignment organizationally to say, hey, we are going to standardize processes. This is what it's going to look like. Work through all the messiness of the organizational issues, the politics, the change management issues. And then once you get that alignment, then you can start building the software. If you start building the software before you've done that, you're probably going to end up just paving the cow paths and automating the way you've always done things. So that's something that comes down to planning in the implementation planning, as well as project governance throughout the implementation. You want to make sure you're managing to that standardization if that's what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, makes sense. What a good question. I think hopefully that makes sense to anybody else that maybe had a similar question for D365 implementations specifically. But I kind of want to shift gears here and get into our article or newsworthy topic. But this today is going to be a little bit different. We're taking kind of information and summarizing a video that was recently posted on the Third Stage YouTube channel. There'll be a link in the bio if you want to check it out, or in the footnotes of this. It's a video basically about Eric talking about, is D365 a top ERP system for 2025? And in this video, he explained that D365 is a highly flexible ERP system, which is great for customization, but it can make it harder to standardize processes. And then he also talked about how there's two main versions. There's a finance and operations for large companies and business central for small to mid-sized companies. And the big advantage for D365 is the integration with Microsoft products like Office, making it super user-friendly and familiar for a lot of companies. Some other things that Eric, you mentioned in this was that D365 has a very strong ecosystem of third-party vendors who tailor the software for specific industries, which adds a lot of value. However, the downside comes here that the quality of these providers can vary very widely. So it's very important that you choose the vendor that if you are implementing D365, it's really important that you choose carefully when you're picking your vendor. But this flexibility does make D365 a good option for mid-sized companies looking to grow, but it also presents challenges in finding consistent support and maintaining standardization. So that was the gist of what Eric talked about in that video. And I wanted to take this chance for Eric to ask a couple more questions for you to kind of expand on all the points you made in that video originally.
Sure.
One of the questions I have is, you mentioned that D365's flexibility can sometimes work against companies trying to standardize. Can you share some specific examples of how this has impacted clients in a negative way?
Yeah, it sort of alludes to the question from the audience that we just addressed here a moment ago. But yeah, I think, when you look at organizations that are implementing D365, and let's just take as an example procurement, you might have different departments or different parts of your organization that are doing procurement differently right now. Especially if your organization has grown through acquisition, you've gone out and acquired other companies, you probably have just different ways of doing something as simple as procurement. Not that procurement is simple, but it's just one function within a broader business. So if you only look at procurement, you might see that, hey, we've got 3 or 4 or 5 different ways of doing things. And let's figure out a way to use our D365 implementation to really standardize our operations and really get on the same page and start acting like one company and get all the efficiency gains that go along with that, and just get that more predictability as an organization and operationally as well. So that would just be one example. When you look at something like procurement, or really any sort of, a lot of times it comes down to any of the shared service areas. So areas that are sort of back office administrative types of functions that support an entire business. There's no need for you to have redundant departments to do the same thing differently. So if you can create sort of a shared service model where procurement, again, going back to that example, instead of having 3 procurement departments, you've got 1 procurement department. They all do the same process and follow the same approach to support the entire business. that can lead to a ton of efficiency gains and a ton of procurement leverage, when you negotiating leverage, when you negotiate with vendors and suppliers and things like that, because now you've sort of consolidated all of your efforts into one department. So that's just one example, one approach within one function of a business. But there's also areas like HR and IT, even sales, even though that's not back office sales, is something else that could be moved towards more of a standard shared service sort of a model. So you really have to look at what you're trying to accomplish as an organization and ensure that you treat your D365 implementation accordingly.
Yeah. So I also have a question about user adoption. So how do companies usually handle the challenge of user adoption? I know you mentioned that maybe it's a little bit more familiar because of the use of products like Office, but is there any challenges that companies face then with user adoption with D365, or what have you seen in that area?
Well, it depends on what system they're coming from. So if they're coming from a non-Microsoft system, legacy system, and they're replacing it with D365, then, it's just going to look and feel different than their old ERP system. Now, it is going to feel somewhat familiar because it has that Microsoft look and feel in many ways, and it does integrate nicely, as you mentioned earlier, with SharePoint and Microsoft Project and other types of Microsoft products. But it's still going to be a change. Now, most organizations we work with are moving from a legacy Microsoft product like Great Plains or Navision, and they're moving to D365. So in those cases, there's a familiarity, but there's still a big change because D365 is essentially sort of a rewrite of the software built for the cloud when you compare it to, some of the legacy D365 solutions. So there's still going to be change there. And so you really have to define what your processes are in this future state, but also show people how their jobs are changing so they understand that, it's not just a tool we're rolling out. We're also rolling out some process changes and potentially some job changes, some organizational changes in the way we do our jobs.
For sure. That makes sense. And where do you see the future of D365 going, I guess? That's maybe something that you didn't mention in the video on YouTube, is where do you see their future going? And are there any upcoming features or trends that companies should be aware of for D365?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think certainly AI and Copilot, the way they're building in Copilot into D365 and some of the other Microsoft products, I think that's going to be real powerful, and that's already happening. But I just think that's going to accelerate. The adoption and use of Copilot is going to accelerate. I think as organizations figure out specific use cases where they could be using Copilot and AI, more broadly speaking, within their D365 environments, the better. And I also think that Microsoft has a pretty unique opportunity here to really go after these monolithic ERP systems like SAP and Oracle, for example, which are their, two of their main competitors. They have an opportunity here to go after them with a more flexible product that can scale, in many ways it can scale as much as an SAP or an Oracle, but it gives you the flexibility that Microsoft affords with its product suite. So not just with D365 and the way the architecture is built and the way you can, modify and integrate a little bit easier with D365 compared to some other systems. You also have the Power BI, Power Apps, SharePoint, Microsoft Project, Copilot. You have all these other tools at your disposal that give you a lot of flexibility and a lot of power. So I think it's a good way for Microsoft to sort of give customers the best of both worlds. And I think they're going to continue to do that. I think they and other vendors like Microsoft that have a similar strategy that provide flexible products or modular products, more low code, no code, AI based products, that sort of thing. I think those sorts of vendors, including Microsoft, are going to chip away at the dominant market share that, SAP and Oracle have with some of the big customers. And I think Microsoft also has a unique way of going after the mid-market as well, lower, small to mid-sized companies with, companies like Oracle NetSuite, for example, competing against them. So I see them doing a lot of what they've done, but just doing more of it. And I think it's probably going to work pretty well for them.
For sure. That makes sense. Speaking of the future for D365, I feel like Adam's going to give us some really good insight on that with things like price increases that are coming or any other things that he might know of. So I think I'm really excited to get into this conversation and hear what he has to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. This will be a great conversation. We've interviewed one of his colleagues on our sister podcast called Transformation Ground Control. We have interviewed other colleagues from UpperEdge on Transformation Ground Control. And by the way, if you don't listen to Transformation Ground Control, that's a tech agnostic podcast that we release every Wednesday. And you can find that podcast by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So it's not just focused on D365, it's focused on digital transformation more broadly. But this will be the first time Adam himself is on, even though we've interviewed his colleagues. So Adam is going to be on the show talking about how to negotiate D365 subscriptions and how to navigate this whole price increase that Microsoft is pushing down to their customers. So he'll have some great advice on how to do that. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to episode number 5 of the Journey to Dynamics 365 podcast. You can find this podcast and past episodes by going to journey2d365.com. You can also subscribe to the show and find the podcast on whichever platform you prefer by simply going to journey2d365.com. And we release new episodes every Sunday. You'll see new episodes here in this first season. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions, sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that focuses on not only helping clients implement D365, but other non-Microsoft products as well, since we're independent. So you can learn more about us by going to thirdstage-consulting.com. And I'm excited for our guest here, who's our first-time guest on this podcast, but also he's the first-time I've interviewed him on any of my podcasts or any of our podcasts. Excited to have him here. It's Adam Mansfield, who is joining us from a company called UpperEdge that helps clients with contract negotiations and with software vendors and system integrators. So we wanted to bring Adam on to talk about this whole price increase that Microsoft has coming on the horizon, as well as how to negotiate those price increases and how to negotiate subscription costs in general with Microsoft and their partners for D365. So with that all being said, Adam, welcome to the show.
Yeah, awesome. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. I'm glad to have you here. I know I've spoken to some of your colleagues at UpperEdge in other podcast interviews in the past, but for those that don't know who UpperEdge is or don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about you and also UpperEdge and what UpperEdge does.
Yeah, absolutely. So UpperEdge, easiest way to look at it is we're an unbiased third-party advisor that helps organizations ensure they have the right relationships, the right products, and the right cost profile commercial relationship with core key vendors: Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday. In addition to that, because you likely have to implement the products, we have a whole host of experts around implementation, hosting, AMS, as well as hyperscaler. And then we have a whole group of people that help organizations on things like, is it the right product resource set? Is it the right skill sets? Is there right financial structures in place? So that's UpperEdge. The other thing I would tell you about UpperEdge is that we made a conscious decision when I said unbiased. We don't have any skin in the game relative to what products you actually use with these vendors. So in other words, we don't come in and say, you should definitely use this product, and there's some kind of kickback behind the scenes that we're going to get. We're completely vendor agnostic. Our goal is to empower and ensure customers are making the right decision, get the right commercial relationship, get the right value. It's really that simple. We've been in business since 2010. So we've been doing this a while. I've been here since day one with Dave Blake, our CEO. I lead our Microsoft, Salesforce, and ServiceNow practices. Then prior to UpperEdge, I was at a company called AMR Research. I was a director there prior to the Gartner acquisition. And quite honestly, that was part of the driving forces behind the creation of UpperEdge, doing something a little different.
Gotcha. Very cool. So it's a cool business model you guys have, and that's why I enjoy speaking with you guys, because we share a lot of the same values. Both my company at Third Stage, your company at UpperEdge, independent, tech agnostic, and that's what makes conversations like this so refreshing. Is because we're not here to sugarcoat the world of D365. In this case, we're here to talk about the realities of it and just understanding how to navigate some of the landmines along the way. I guess just to back up for a second, how did you end up in the space, just in general? I know you start off at AMR, you've been at UpperEdge for quite some time.
Really good question. It's a question I get from my family a lot when they also try to explain to them, what is it you exactly do?
And why do you do that?
And why do you do that? Can you fix my computer? That's the other one I always get.
Yes,
I'm like, no, I'm not. That's not why space. Short and sweet. I went to law school. I had aspirations of doing law, practicing law. Really figured out it wasn't my thing. Got my MBA and my JD. Really was interested in technology at the time, cloud, all these like words, and then applied for a job at a company called Skillsoft back in the day, early stage, within their pricing and contracts team. And then I really sunk my teeth into kind of seeing what goes on behind the scenes, which I learned a lot from. And then there was this company, AMR Research, this guy, Dave Blake, who was leading a group there. And he said he was looking for someone. Honestly, I didn't even really know what it was because a recruiter came in and said, hey, you might be interested in this. That was like 18, 19 years ago, and fell in love with it, love advising customers, love ensuring that they have the right relationships in place because these are critical vendors for them. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
Very cool. Yeah, I've yet to meet someone in our industry that had it part of their master plan from the beginning. They were 5 years old and they knew they wanted to be an enterprise tech consultant. I'm still waiting to meet that person, but because I know I stumbled into it too. So it's good to hear it's not just me. It's not just you. It seems like the whole industry is sort of built around people that stumbled into it.
100%.
So you work with these different vendors. You mentioned you work with Microsoft, D365, Salesforce, ServiceNow, et cetera. At least you personally, and then of course UpperEdge works beyond those ecosystems. But when we look specifically at D365, how has D365 sourcing and contracting evolved in recent years? What are some of those trends you're seeing in for companies that are contracting the software?
Yeah, no, it's something that it comes up a lot when I have these types of conversations. I think the core kind of trend would be Microsoft is starting to get really good at using a siloed approach. So still selling to a line of business individual. Obviously, IT is still involved. They try to circumvent procurement. But what's happening now is as they've acquired LinkedIn, as they continue to talk about the intricacies of something like Copilot for Microsoft 365 and how there's value back to the business relative to D365. So the evolution has been, don't think of it as just Dynamics 365 when you compare it to an SAP or an Oracle. Think of it as Microsoft, which is D365. Again, I say LinkedIn because the data there, it funnels to sales. Then you have the Microsoft 365. You have, Teams. You have they paint the picture. So the evolution has really become one Microsoft is going to give you more value than an SAP with other things. So they've definitely been full throttle on that. Without all being said, they're still very good at chunking things up, siloed approach to the negotiation, getting buy-in here to influence over here. That still happens. But their ability to tie the picture together and make D365 more of a focal point to the discussion versus kind of the afterthought has definitely accelerated, I'd say, over the last 24 months.
Interesting. Are most customers you're working with, are they procuring more than just D365? So in other words, are they coming to you saying, hey, Adam, can you guys help us not only procure D365, but also procure, upgrades to Office 365 and SharePoint and Power BI or whatever other Microsoft products they might want?
Absolutely. And part of this is it's being driven by Microsoft to think that way, but it's also coming to organizations that are trying to think about things the right way. So what I mean by that is I think they've heard enough out there, whether it's people like yourself or myself and UpperEdge, they've heard enough of, hey, if you're going to go spend this amount of money and make a strategic decision about D365, you definitely still have something going on with Microsoft, because who doesn't have Microsoft? So you got to think of it as pull Microsoft where they want to go to, which is one thing. It's one negotiation. It's one set of products, because they're the interoperability. We hear you, Microsoft, but now what I want from you is to come back to me commercially and give me the right construct across everything. And an example with that would be, hey, we hear you. We're open to a discussion about whether it's sales enterprise or finance premium. It doesn't matter. We're open to that discussion. But you also want me to consider moving to E5. You also want me to consider Power Apps. You also want me to consider whatever that other thing is. The evolution has been, okay, hey, Microsoft, we only have so many dollars, right? And if you want us to be one Microsoft as well, that dollar pool isn't going to change. So if you want, figure out how you can cut it within Microsoft, come back to us then and show me what that looks like. Not just a slide that speaks to the value of the interplay of the solutions. Show me the interplay from a commercial perspective as well. And that is definitely becoming impactful. Now, with that being said, Eric, trust me when I tell you this, there's also the postmortems that I do where it's like, hey, Adam, we just did this D365 deal. And we did a switch from SAP, or we did a switch from Salesforce, and we got this great deal, and we have our EA coming up in 9 months. I'd like help on that. And I'm kind of like, okay. Did you think about maybe talking about this all at once? Could you? And so that's out there too, right? Now, could you correct that? Sure. But yeah, that's what's going on right now.
That's super interesting. So when you have customers come to you guys and they're looking for help procuring Microsoft products, including D365, are most of them, or could you estimate, or do you have an estimate of how many of them are coming from a legacy Microsoft ERP product like Great Plains or the old Dynamics or Navision or whatever?
Yeah, it's a great point. So what I would tell you is that the majority of deals we're working right now, they've already kind of done that push migration over. So they've moved. Now there's still there's some lag there, if you will. Most of it is of the scenario of this. We are SAP, we are Oracle. Again, if we want to talk Salesforce from the sales perspective, the point is we're there. We are now going down a path of AI, down a path of the future, enhancing our solution. And Microsoft has been in here knocking on all of our C-suite's doors saying, look, we get it. You're SAP shop. We understand it. But could you just give us a chance to come in and talk to you about how can we, again, bring more value to you? Because we're the leaders in, again, this is their pitch, security, AI, where you're going. Also, the platform solution itself, which you will be using from Microsoft, which is Office and things like that. Why aren't you thinking about it as one perspective? The reason I bring that up is that's more what we're having right now. So whether they're going into before moving to S4HANA, or whether or not they're trying to upgrade in those environments, and then they said, well, let's just let Microsoft get a chance. In the past, it may have been, let's give them a chance because we spent a lot of money with them. It's the right thing to do, but yeah. Now it's, we're really in on this. The message is loud and clear. We want this to be a true evaluation. So it's tied to kind of the overarching need to enhance the ERP or the functionality, right? The other thing that's going on is there are customers that are on legacy, and Microsoft is swooping in and saying, look, don't go look outside of Microsoft, because let us go in first and show you why you should just stay with us. So they're kind of like using it as a preemptive keep out strategy, and then honing in on, again, the bigger picture of Microsoft.
I'm here with Adam Mansfield. We're talking about how to negotiate with Microsoft Dynamics 365. We've got a lot more to cover here. We'll be right back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast.
If If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to episode number 5 of the Journey to D365 podcast. You can find episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through D365 implementations as well as other non-Microsoft digital transformations as well. I'm here with Adam Mansfield, and we're chatting about how to negotiate subscriptions and price increases with Microsoft D365. I think that's one of the advantages that Microsoft has that other vendors don't have. And you compared Microsoft to SAP. You know, SAP requires all this other stuff that's not SAP products that complete their solution, whereas Microsoft provides, for better or for worse, whether you like it or not, they provide tools that can do and run the whole gamut of what most enterprises need to run their business.
And they have other areas where it's not just calling upon the relationship that's been in place. They also can do things like what I was saying before. Okay, what if we could do something for you on your Azure spend? What if what if we could do something for you on your Office 365 or your Power BI or even LinkedIn? What if we could do something there to free up some money? Would that be of interest to you? So they have other things that it's not only just the connection point, sell point. It's literally, what if I could get creative other places so that you can take some money that you may have been spending somewhere else and drop it there? They have that ability for many reasons, depending on what day it is, the biggest company in the world. 2, they sell everything, like you said, so they can play that card and eat some of that potential internal infighting around, well, that was my revenue stream. They're like, we don't care because now they're a D365 customer. We'll figure it out.
Right. So October 1st, 2024, that's a big milestone in the Microsoft procurement space. Tell us a bit about what October 1st means to buyers, or should mean to buyers in the Microsoft space.
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of conversations, as you can imagine, leading up to this. So the announcement came out mid-April. In true fashion, it was a blog post on their website. Brian Good posted it, corporate VP business platform. Essentially, it's the exact message. So if you were to go back to March of 2022 and look at the blog post about the price increase for Microsoft 365, and you just kind of word replaced, you'd kind of see the exact message, which is quite simply, it's been 5 years. We've made a lot of enhancements. We've put a lot of added value in there. It's time for an increase. But don't worry. Don't think of it as an increase. Think of it as you're going to get a lot more value than when you first signed up. Same message, different product. The October 1st happens to be the date. So think of it as if you're a new customer, like we were just talking about, post October 1st, your pricing is going to be higher. Pre-October 1st, it's going to be a little bit lower. And again, these are list prices. Existing customers, if you have a renewal date that's after October 1st, we're just giving you a heads up. This is what's coming. What I would say is these increases are also not insignificant. If you think about it, and I always have to remember this because it's all over the map, but if you think about things like finance, 17% increase, supply chain management, 17%, sales enterprise, 11%. These are not like 3, 5, 6%. These are big uplifts, right? And so that's really, really important for customers to be aware of. And it kind of ties to this. Microsoft will have a legitimate argument to make if it's a black and white, look at all these added features. The problem is that those features need to be used to be of value. And so what's happening is a lot of customers I'm talking to get ahead of it, they're looking at it and going, Adam, forget the new stuff. We're not even using all of the other stuff that's already in there, right? So Microsoft is getting pushback on this, as most vendors do when you hit them with big increases like this. The other thing that Microsoft's not stupid, they're pretty smart. That's why they are what they are. There's also a game to this. Pre-October 1st, they can come in and be like, hey, get you a really sweet deal, some extra discounting. We can do it for you. And I'll talk about earnings in a second, but we can do that for you. I got some real, just think about this. It's a big dollar difference. There's that side of it. They're coming in and saying two things. You come and execute it, you add it right now, or you upgrade to premium edition, whatever it may be. You're going to get it at this lower price. And by the way, I have these discounts I can give you on top of list that's even more so than what I can give you later. That's available to you. So it's not just the price increase that's going to happen on October 1st. It's I have more to give discount wise. So if you compound that, it's a sweet deal for you. What they're also saying is, to your point, if you do it now and your renewal is not for a year from now, you're locking in this pricing. But here's the game. If you do the deal and don't extend your term, so that's a trick, right? So a lot of customers are like, well, I'll do the deal. I won't extend my term because I don't know what else I'm doing. I want to keep it, flexibility. Theoretically, yes, you're still locking it in for this period of time, but there's going to be an end date. And if you don't get protections, they're going to get you later. So it's a little bit of a game. The other part to it is, and this is what I suspect is going to happen because I've been doing this for a long time. Microsoft is going to be able to come in, and once the page is turned and it's now October 2nd, they're going to be able to come in and say, look, you know what happened. We've added a lot of value. We increased our pricing 17%. What if I was able, I'll fight for you. What if I was able to not only eliminate that uplift, but go get you that special discount? What if I could do that? Would you willing to consider moving off of SAP? Would you be considered to give? They're going to use it as an artificial inflated number to push a bigger discount. It's like, clothing stores and other things like, oh, we marked down the t-shirt from $100 to $20. Well, the t-shirt was probably an $8 t-shirt to begin with. So the point is they're going to artificially inflate through this uplift as well to use it as a let me fight for you to bring that down. There's an optic to that. The other piece to it is they're going to come in and they're going to say, okay, you missed the deadline. I also know, and I think this is what's going on, you might be interested in Copilot. So what if we were to do this? What if we could not only get rid of that increase, give you that special discounting, but would you be willing to consider, say, Copilot as an add-on for D365? Would you be interested in Copilot for Microsoft 365, which, by the way, is included in Copilot for sales. It's included in Copilot for customer service. Would you be interested in a holistic? Could we get the right people in the room to have that conversation? Because maybe I could do even more for you, bringing down that uplifted price. Like, this is how they're building and setting up things. So yes, it's all about, can I force deals in before October? But it's also really about setting up the good customer-friendly Microsoft on a artificially, air quote, inflated number. Now, again, I say the air quote because, again, as we talked about before, I'm not questioning. There is added value. Like, there is added functionality. That's no question. The question always becomes, is the specific customer getting that benefit? Often the case is not yet, 2 years from now, maybe. So then why is the list price going up for me?
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. It reminds me of my wife when she goes to the mall and buys some clothes and say she spends $200, but something list price $200. She bought it for $150. She'll come home all excited because she saved me $50. And I'll say, you didn't save me $50. You spent $150.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I always like putting things in simple terms like that. And I think with these negotiations with, Microsoft or other vendors, I often find the most impactful negotiation is when you just put it in simple terms. Like, this is what you want me to walk into my CFO or my controller or whoever. This is what you want me to explain to them, which is this vendor increased their list pricing. The next question I'm going to get is, well, what are we getting for value currently? And if I have to show them we're using 75% of the product and we're never going to, 2 years from now, we're going to use the new stuff, there's no way they're going to buy that as the explanation. So you have to do better, Microsoft, if you want what you're telling the market you want, which is market share. That's the other piece to this. If you look at these earnings calls or listen to these earnings calls, Satya and Amy Hood, they're always up there talking about D365. And in the last earnings call, at the end, when they came up about D365, they said two things that really stood out. They said, number one, our revenue growth was 19%. So at the end of that was their year end, 19%. And here was the better than expected new business drove that. And then Satya dropped in and he said, and don't forget, better than expected market share gain. So this is what it's all about. So that tactic of October 1st, which was announced in April, definitely led to accelerated new business in June because customers were afraid of that October. So it's working and they're showing the market that. What I suspect is that as Microsoft continues to push these issues into next year, into next June, like I just said, they're going to come in and be like, well, what if we could do this? And that's how they're going to keep trying to build momentum in that space.
So everything you said these last few minutes is sort of leading me down a controversial path. Don't worry, it's not politics, it's not religion, but it's this concept of vendor lock. You talk a lot about how Microsoft provides all these different tools you want, any tool in the world you could want for your business. Microsoft has a solution for it. They've also got these cloud solutions where now they're sort of imposing an increase that isn't just inflation based. It's not just based on CPI or anything like that. I'm sure it's not arbitrary. I'm sure there's some science to it behind the scenes, but they're large increases. So what are your thoughts on vendor lock? Is that something that buyers should be thinking about as they procure D365 or Microsoft tools in general?
Yeah, I was wondering we were going to go with that, but yeah, it's vendor lock. I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation, which is I'm glad you brought it up. So here's how I look at it with Microsoft. And I always think of this is how, whether it's your sourcing or IT, it doesn't matter. They think about it this way. It's vendor specific. So with Microsoft, you have to just sometimes look at the situation and just acknowledge where you are. So here's the question I always ask customers. What's the likelihood of you ripping out Office 365? What is it?
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you tether to that an AI solution, then what's the likelihood of that going away? And then you just keep going. Microsoft 365 E5 includes Power BI Pro, which they did intentionally to get Power BI usage, to keep Tableau out. And then if you flip that to the D365 side, let's play the scenarios out. If you are a current SAP or Oracle customer and you invite Microsoft in and Microsoft wins, I don't need to tell you this. Everyone who's listening to this, and Eric, you know this, that decision to do that, forget 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whoever did, they're not going to come back to the table and be like, whoa, I think we're going to go back to SAP, or I think we're going to go back. Because first of all, the dollars associated with the transition, then you have the implementation costs, you have the change management. There's so many reasons why, not to mention, imagine that conversation. Hi, SAP, we're back. It didn't really work out with Microsoft. We'd like to come back to you. How do you think that negotiation is going to go? They're going to go, oh, really cool. Here's what you're going to spend. So, so vendor lock-in definitely has, if you don't prepare yourself the right way and get the right parameters in it, it definitely has a negative kind of connotation. But what I would tell you with Microsoft, you could actually use it as a good thing. What I mean by that is put to Microsoft the idea that, look, we know what we're giving you, and it's not just dollars. What I'm giving you is vendor lock-in. In other words, acknowledge it. Stop worrying about it as a nasty word that you want to not say. Put it out there. Like, use it to your advantage, because quite honestly, it's not likely that it's not going to be the case. Now, what I would also say is that Microsoft, one of the things you tell us is that some of your solutions, like Copilot for Sales, as an example, that's under the D365 blanket, can work very well with Salesforce. So I'm just curious, do you say that because you really do care about us having all the right point solutions? Or are you going to constantly just jam down our throat the next thing? So from a vendor lock-in, as you go wide, setting up an expectation that, look, yes, we all know I'm locked in. We get it, okay? But with that being said, there are going to be slices that I know you may want that don't have the biggest dollars, but I also know, Microsoft, that isn't always your motivator. Dollars for you is a lot different than for Workday or ServiceNow, because you're massive. What matters to you is being able to get up there and say, they're now using Teams instead of Zoom. Or they're now using a smaller solution that maybe has a smaller sticker price, but there's flexibility for you to choose something different than them. So there's a vendor lock-in larger, but there's always going to be some slices that will continue to create leverage. The other thing is, when it comes to vendor lock-in, for Microsoft specifically, they typically dig their heels in on future price protections, because in their mind, you're never going to leave, right? So they know you're not going to leave, so they're going to take advantage of it. Going back to what I just said, let's take the ugly word and put it on the table and say, okay, we are locked into you. Because of that, I want something more from you than perhaps I'd want from someone else. And what I want is assurances about future pricing. And if you can't give them to me, I may pause giving you anything that's going to get locked in. So you maybe, instead of fast forwarding to what you want, you have to get me first before I can be locked in. And the only way I'm going to do it is, I appreciate your cost discounting. I need a protection. So if you can't give me that, then I'm not going to give you something that gets locked in. So it's just that simple. It's a rite of passage. So again, it's all about putting it out in front of them as you know it's there, versus hiding and trying to manipulate the conversation to get to where you want to go. Use it to your advantage.
Right. Yeah, that's good advice. And rather than being scared of it or hoping that it goes away or that you can work around it, you could work around. I suppose there's ways to do that. But I think what you're saying is you can embrace it and use it to your advantage and sort of take the leverage back in the conversation
100%.
as a buyer.
100%.
I'm here with Adam Mansfield. We're talking about how to negotiate with Microsoft Dynamics 365. We've got a lot more to cover here. We'll be right back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to episode number 5 of the Journey to D365 podcast. You can find episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through D365 implementations as well as other non-Microsoft digital transformations as well. I'm here with Adam Mansfield, and we're chatting about how to negotiate subscriptions and price increases with Microsoft D365. So what are some of the biggest negotiation mistakes that you see customers make when they're procuring D365 and some of these other Microsoft tools?
Yeah, I think there's a couple that come to mind immediately. The first is, we've talked about it a little bit, if possible, and I know it's not always possible, but if you are about to give them something that's incredibly important. So again, forget the dollars, market share, new business, right? Microsoft doesn't have a lot of that they can say to the market, because Microsoft, they already have all the customers. It's for this space though, they don't. So that's important to them. So if you're about to do that, I highly, highly, highly recommend, when you're starting the evaluation, so forget the commercials, pull the company together. When's your Microsoft EA, Office 365, Power Apps, whatever it may be? When is that up? SQL Server, when is that up? What are you doing on Azure? What are you doing do you have a LinkedIn relationship? Is it completely separate? Do you even know that LinkedIn was bought by Microsoft? Get yourself all organized, because if you don't approach Microsoft with this is what I need for D365, but I need this in these other areas, you are losing a massive amount of leverage for other key things. So that's number one mistake. Keeping it as siloed. There's a lot of work here. I don't want to involve other people at this company. It's too far out. There's enough going on here that we got to stay focused. I get it. The question is, do you want to be focused and get the right deal for D365, or do you want to add a little extra time to make sure you have the right Microsoft deal? And that's the key. The other thing that ends up happening is customers get very focused on, again, what my immediate needs, what I can absorb, what we can digest, what I can take on for change management. And so a perfect example would be, you could talk about D365 finance, you could say D365 supply chain, or you could even go in the sales space. But what happens in 2 years if maybe premium edition is something you actually might get value from? So maybe you should be focused on, yes, what you need now, of course. You don't want to overcommit. But you should be trying to pre-negotiate what it looks like if you do upgrade to that next thing, because isn't that what ultimately they should want that too. So the position is, I need it so I know, but it also helps you remove friction, Microsoft. When that time comes, I know what it's going to cost. So and then the third thing Well, actually, there's a fourth. But the third thing is, we talked about those protections. I cannot, I've said this before and got a little bit of pushback with Microsoft specifically. Of course, discounting and upfront cost, everyone cares about that. But if you don't make renewal protections equally as important, you are losing the negotiation, period. Because I have seen the ability, vendor lock-in, Microsoft will make up for it. And even if you can't get exactly what you want on those protections, if you don't elevate the conversation so that the ask is made to the right people, so that 3 years from now, when they jack your price up, you can't call back to that, you're failing there too. Like it's not even 1A, 1B, it's one. It is both. They need to be, Microsoft needs to understand that your discount, your cost reduction means nothing to me if it doesn't have a price protection. It means nothing. I won't even look at it without a price protection. That's, and now again, I'm making it sound easier than it is. That's why you got to give yourself enough time, work with firms like us, right? But like the point is, that's it. And the fourth one, investment dollars, funding, ESIF. Judson Atoff has talked about this, and I think sometimes he kind of dances a little bit about what he meant. But what I'm going to tell you is Microsoft is sitting on a ton of cash, okay? A ton of cash. And they basically at one point said, Satya and the board have basically told Judson and others within, Brian Good and others, we will give dollars if it will help get the deal closed. And what I mean by that is not discounting. That means significant dollars to help with an implementation. Significant dollars, and by the way, it doesn't have to be MCS, Microsoft Consulting Services. It can be used on someone in their partner network, which, by the way, is pretty much everyone. So
tens of thousands of companies.
If you don't put that in as maybe issue maybe B or 2 or 3, you're failing there too. Because I am not talking about tens of thousands of dollars, right? Like for these big, I'm talking hundreds of thousands, million. They will give you that, and if you don't, again, sync it all as one thing, you are missing it because, as you know, Eric, you got to then implement this. You got to change management. You got a lot of other dollars that are coming. Let Microsoft foot the bill. Let them foot the bill. They have the money. And if you ask the right way and you position it the right way, which, again, we help with, this is a significant win, which would also help organizations get the value quicker. So everyone wins in that scenario. It's just so many don't ask, or I look at these deals and it's like, oh yeah, they gave me like $100,000. And I'm like, well, okay, well, you left like $800,000 on the table. Now, again, I say it differently, but I'm a pretty candid guy. So
right. And I'm sure that helps in the negotiations. And I love how you're sort of taking this, what you're saying before is what's perceived as a negative, this vendor lock, and you're sort of turning it on its head now and creating, it's almost like customer lock. Now you're sort of flipping that around and using it to your advantage to say, okay, we're going to lock in here. We're going to embrace the fact that we're locking in as customer and vendor. Let's lock in, and here's what it needs to look like. You're going to lock in discounts for me and pre-negotiated additional modules or additional systems within the Microsoft ecosystem that we might need, and or implementation support, that's great advice too.
And Microsoft, and the thing about Microsoft is, again, revenue always matters, and I always get in trouble for saying it's like, obviously they're publicly traded, that revenue matters, right? But that's not where their problems are. They need to go to the market and say, there's more for us to sell. I have this massive available base that I'm going to take the total available market and addressable market and push into them. And then our contracts are long and everyone knows it's hard to leave. So they need to get that remaining performance obligation, that outer year stuff. They're just keep accelerating that, which again, put that in front of them. I'm giving you outer years too. So because of that cost to entry to win this market share, you need this. And not to mention, this just brought up another thing. This is an area where Microsoft does put a value on publicity. So with Microsoft Office 365, that world, it's kind of like an implied everyone has it. Now, they like to publicize E5 and all that. But with D365, if you also are able as a company to put your logo up there, do a success story, that's massive, because it's typically going to be one of two things. I'm moving from old school Microsoft to new school Microsoft, which is a win for Microsoft because the R&D is paying off. Or it's I'm moving off of SAP, or I battled against SAP and these guys chose us. That is, that's so valuable to them that it's not even the dollars again. There's not many customers they need publicity, but on this vessel, that's an area they still need it.
That's great. Yeah, that's it's worth something to Microsoft, and you should take advantage of that. What about just real quickly? I know that we spent the whole time we could have spent on this one question, but I'll ask it anyway. Maybe we can get a summary from you, and that is, what about negotiating with your reseller? You were talking about how many different Microsoft partners and resellers are out there. You talked about negotiating subscription costs, but what about negotiating the services cost with your partner, with your Microsoft partner? Any advice you'd leave us with there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So they play a very important role in the overarching Microsoft relationship. So I just want to start there, right? Now, from my company, my engagements with working customers, what I often hear is, I didn't know they should also be providing me that. So this is what ends up happening. So we get in these engagements and I say, okay, I know you're talking about Microsoft helping you with value receipt, and I know you're talking about Microsoft and relative to being there for you, but where is your VAR? What have they been doing? Where are they focused? And what they come to find out is the cost profile there is also not mapping to value, because there's things that the VAR should be doing to help these customers, one, make sure they're getting the right value, licensing as well, things like that. On top of it, if you're using them to get additional support or services, I would always recommend reminding your VAR that when you, whether it's CIO, whoever, has to go get money from Microsoft, you're part of that equation. And so what I mean by that is, if you, VAR, or other third-party reseller, want to increase your costs, or if my cost profile there is not feeling right, it may limit me from doing more things with Microsoft. And I would just remind you what ends up happening, which is, this is how it's going to play out. I'm going to have a meeting with Microsoft at a senior level, and I'm going to tell them I look at the overall cost profile. And then I'm going to tell them that on your side of the cost profile, I feel like there's not a lot of flexibility. Because of that, I'm going to have to slow down some of my decisions on what I'm doing relative to Microsoft. What do you think is going to happen? So Microsoft's going to pick the phone up and say, what are you doing over at XYZ company? What kind of margins are you trying to get from them? What is going on? Secondly, I'm also going to play it as, if you can step up for me, I'm going to then have a different conversation with that same executive at Microsoft, which is, you know what? My VAR, my reseller, here's what they just did for me. And that landed really well. They did a workshop. They came in, they did this, and they're doing a great job. Yeah. Isn't that going to be nice for you to get from Microsoft as they're trying to decide which ones are platinum and gold and whatever? Right? So you have to kind of tie it all together. And then the other thing I would just say is, this is no fault of theirs. At the end of the day, they need to drive revenue. I would always kind of take a step back and think about recommendations that are being made that are always centered around maybe upgrading or adding. It's perfectly okay. And I think they should do it if it makes sense, but really, really treat them as a vendor versus kind of like a partner on your side. Because at the end of the day, there's going to be a ripple back to a contractual relationship that Microsoft's part of and they're part as well.
Right. That's great advice. Great place to leave it. You've covered a lot of ground here in terms of how to negotiate with Microsoft Direct. Some of the things to think about as well as, on the services side too, because you're right. You do have to look at the total cost of ownership and the total cost of what this is all going to cost. And you kind of have to look at it in one big picture, even if you are going to break it up into phases and immediately may not be focused on the whole big picture. You can sort of negotiate with the end state in mind and then go back to your implementation mindset of, okay, now how are we going to implement this now that we've negotiated this great deal with Microsoft and their partners? So that's good stuff. So how do people get a hold of you and UpperEdge? How do we learn more?
Yeah, so UpperEdge.com is the easiest way, right? We have a website up there. And for me, I'm all over LinkedIn as well, always accepting connections and messaging there. And then, honestly, just reach out. Just reach out, whether it's from the contact us on UpperEdge, Mansfield at UpperEdge.com, or on my LinkedIn. And what I mean by this is, I love talking about this stuff. So at the end of the day, even if it doesn't become an opportunity to formally work together, just reach out. I'm happy just to talk, happy to pick. I learn through conversations.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing too. Like, it's a two-way street, and I know their time's valuable. So how to reach out to me, whatever's easiest for them.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Great conversation. Learned a lot from you, and there's some great advice you've given us here, some great practical tips on how to negotiate your D365 software and implementation. We want to debrief on some of these points that Adam brought up and sort of build on some of those threads. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Welcome back to episode number 5 of the Journey to D365 podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Fiakuski. You can find episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. You can see all the past episodes and keep up with upcoming episodes. You can also subscribe to this podcast by going to journey2d365.com. So, Darian, we just had Adam on the show. We talked about negotiations, price increases, all that good stuff. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that discussion?
Yeah, I think first of all, really great information for anybody that's looking to implement D365 right now. I think it's important things that you probably want to know and understand, and especially when it comes to price increases. Some things I really liked, but so when he said, you guys, you need to understand that the value of everything you're getting from Microsoft, and then also negotiate, for those future price protections. I thought that was a huge tip for customers that are looking to implement Microsoft D365. With that, Eric, could you explain maybe what would be some of the price protections that companies could negotiate and put into place in their agreements? Is that something that you are aware of, any options there?
Yeah, when we're helping our clients negotiate as part of our software evaluation services, we'll help them negotiate their contracts with vendors and with system integrators. And in a couple of tips that we see work really well is, one is, don't buy more subscriptions than you need up front. If you think about a 2-year D365 implementation, Microsoft and their partners are going to want you to buy all the subscriptions you're ever going to need. They're going to want you to buy them on day one, even though it's going to be a couple of years potentially before you actually start using the software and getting value out of it. So that's one, is to say, hey, we're going to carve out what we need now. And then we, by the way, want to price protect or lock in pricing for future purchases of the subscriptions that we're going to need once we get closer to go live. Again, vendors don't like that because they'd much rather have the money up front and have you start paying on the annual recurring subscriptions as soon as possible, but that is something you can negotiate. The other is just to lock in where you can lock in a cap on potential future increases. And, as we discussed in this discussion or this episode here today with Adam, those price increases are arbitrary. You have no control over them, and they can be pretty significant. I mean, he was talking about, I think, as high as a 17% increase, depending on the customer and the module and all that good stuff. But that's a big increase. And it's kind of scary to think that, your whole business is at the mercy now of whatever Microsoft decides they want to do in terms of pricing. And that is the downside of cloud SaaS subscription-based pricing, is it's not as simple as before, where when you're on-prem, you could just say, well, I'll just stop paying maintenance then if you're going to keep increasing maintenance, and you could still use the software. Well, if you stop paying your subscription costs, you just have no software to use. So now they sort of have you, held ransom because they are hosting your software, they're hosting your data, and you stop paying, it's pretty easy for them to turn it off. So that's the downside of cloud. And I think, we're going to see some fallout from that here in the next few years. I don't know when, but at some point we'll see some fallout and some really frustrating discussions, I imagine, with companies that want to switch vendors, or they just don't want to give in to the price increases.
Right. Yeah. That's like, I know you like to say the dark side of the cloud that lots of people don't like to talk about a lot of the time. So good to mention that always. Another question I have is, you guys talked about in this conversation, you guys or the buyers really need to understand the value they're getting from Microsoft. So what methods or criteria should businesses use to assess the value that they're actually receiving from Microsoft?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's based on which modules and the scope of the software that you're acquiring and implementing. So you want to make sure that first of all, you're not investing in shelfware, which would be modules or licenses or subscriptions that you're not using for whatever reason, because you either bought too many subscriptions, or you bought modules that you're just not going to use, or, you were able to get functionality out of other modules without needing those advanced modules. So you just want to make sure you have a lot of clarity on what you're buying, first of all, to sort of manage your cost. And that's, one of the factors in an ROI calculation. So the other side of it, though, is where you get in the value. And so, I don't know that it's really incumbent upon Microsoft or even their resellers to ensure you get value. It's sort of up to you, the implementing organization, to ensure you're getting value. So that comes down to user adoption, which we talked about earlier in this episode. It comes down to really making sure your processes are clear and that you've defined what you want your improved future state to be. It also means that you use some of the capabilities that Microsoft provides within D365 and its ecosystem. If you do those things, you're going to be a lot more likely to get a business value out of it. But again, that's sort of up to you. You want Microsoft, you want the resellers to help you, realize or come to that conclusion. But their job really is to help you deploy technology. Their job is not necessarily to help you get an ROI and value out of the software. You would think it'd be one and the same, but it's really not. And so someone's got to connect the dots between technology, which is what they provide, and business value, which is what you as an organization need to provide. And that's where, we end up helping a lot of our clients with, is just making sure they get value out of their implementations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like it was a really good conversation overall. I feel like this is definitely an episode that any company that wants to implement D365 needs to listen to, so that way you're made aware of everything that you maybe need to know before going in to sign a contract.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good conversation. And if you are part of a project team that's going through negotiations or about to go through the procurement cycle with Microsoft's partners or Microsoft themselves, be sure to share this episode with them so they can learn from some of the tips and lessons we've talked about here today. So thank you for a great episode today, Darian, and thank you to our guest, Adam, for being here today. Really appreciate his input as well. Be sure to check out next week's episode. We're going to have a guest on named Jacob Ben Smet. I'm sorry. He's based out of Europe, and he's going to be talking about change management in D365 implementations. And then in episode 7, in 2 weeks from now, we'll talk about how to be successful with D365 and Business Central with Richard Sides. So be sure to check out those upcoming episodes. And of course, if you missed any of the past episodes, be sure to go check out Journey to D365.com. So I hope you found this podcast helpful. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on the Journey to D365 podcast. Take care.